I noticed certain qualities that you could say the people in power have that are similar or applicable in practicing conscious living. However, the difference is that there's no desire to harm people, right? Or it's not at the expense of other people, or there's no desire to exploit, right? Or to step on other people. Or the power is used not over, not to impose upon people, right? The current people in power, that's how they operate, right? Their power is at the expense of others or of the world, or they use people to take up the load or the burden or the cost that they wouldn't want to take upon themselves, right? They capitalize on the gains and socialize the cost. They hijack or they hoard the wealth, you can say the currency, and the cost or the liability is diffused or spread towards the masses. And so the masses serve as their load carrier, as their burden carrier, as the laborers, or as the scapegoats, as whatever. Now, in my previous video, I talked about the invisible force. And so instead of, you can say, this diffusion, instead of directing it at others, it's directed at the invisible. Basically, it's seeing that the idea or the definition is the one that carries that load itself, that you don't have to. Essentially, emptiness remains empty, right? So emptiness really cannot take the load. It's naturally an outsider. It's naturally empty, you know? It cannot be quote unquote bothered by content. It's content itself that carries itself. So for example, with emptiness as the outsider, as the untouchable, undiminishable field, you can say. Now, when we take a look at the, people in power, the 1% of society, that's how they are. It's like they emulate, you could say, this quality of emptiness. They remove themselves from the masses, right? They're not part of the masses. They're not part of the labor. As I've mentioned in my previous recordings, the spectators are not gonna be in the gladiator arena, right? They're not gonna get in there. They're not gonna be in that muck. And so that's how people in power are. They have placed a kind of separation between them and the masses, right? They're not gonna be penalized for what they do. It's only the normal people who get punished for whatever wrongdoing. We are separated from that. We are untouchable. We are undiminishable. We are quote unquote above the law. We don't take the blame. We don't take the burden. We're not liable. We don't get our hands in the muck, but we get all the wealth. We get all the profits. We get all the benefits and the liability, the accountability, the costs, the burden, the masses. It's the masses who carry that load, who carry that burden. We are insulated, we are private, we are untouchable, right? So that's how they are. And so we have the society that we have today, run by these entities. And of course, that is very harmful, right? That is without integrity. That is throwing away integrity. Now, that kind of treatment, you can say, we can apply ourselves. But instead of directing it at the quote unquote at others, at the masses, at other people, thus causing them harm, thus being, being abusive and a psychopath, we recognize it or direct it at, again, the invisible, at content, at the idea itself. And so we don't have to take up the burden. And again, it's basically coming back into emptiness because emptiness is empty. Emptiness is an outcast from content. It cannot be quote unquote bothered by by content, right? Now recently I had my wisdom teeth taken out. And before the procedure, I was nervous, I was full of anxiety. I'm scared. I'm totally not at ease. I'm anticipating like so much pain, or what if things go wrong or whatever. So I'm carrying that burden. I am merged with the idea. And so, of course, there's suffering. It's like merging with noise. You've taken that on, right? The experience of anxiety, concern, oh, what if things don't go well, blah, blah, blah. I'm totally merged with that. And so what I did was I wrote it down. I wrote it down. I vented all that anxiety out. That act of writing it down, it's like expelling it or putting it out or diffusing it from here to there. Now there's the unmergence that happened. And when I've let it all out, I felt at ease. And so that's a kind of, you can say, mm, response, instead of just holding it in, holding all that in yourself, in your system, until the procedure comes and you're so full of nerves, full of anxious energy. It's releasing that so that you are in power, you can say, when the time comes. You're not too anxious, or you're not gonna get panic attack when 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 you're there, right? So I find that helpful, and that's just an example, right? It's like this burden. Instead of me carrying that, I you could say I projected it towards the paper or the document, so it's the one that's carrying the load. I've already shifted, I've shifted the load, right? It's the one that holds it so that I can be more relaxed, especially in our country. Taking out of wisdom teeth, it's not the usual here to be sedated or to have really strong anesthetic that you become unconscious. Here, you're totally awake, you're totally conscious as the procedure is getting done. So, anyway, that's a practical application. Now, if it were a different circumstance, but a similarly unpreferred situation, and if I were someone who's in a position of power, what I'll do is that I'll direct this burden onto another person. You're the one. You carry my load for me. You suffer for me so that I can be free. As we know, that's also how narcissists are, right? Instead of carrying all the insecurities, all the negative ideas, they project it onto other people so that other people carry that load. You're the one. I vented it towards you. I projected it towards you. I released it towards you, so you suffer. So I feel better. That is the unmergence, but at the expense of other people. Again, it's throwing away integrity. There's a good feeling you're chasing after the release or the feeling of goodness, but it's always at the expense of other people, at the expense of the masses, at the expense of the world. That's their mode of operation. It's capitalizing, colonizing, or stealing the benefit, the credit, the wealth, and dumping or diffusing or releasing the liabilities, the cost, the negativity, the accountability to other people, right? To the masses. Now, that's how narcissists operate, right? It's always at the expense. It wants others to be expended, or to be squashed or to be depleted so that they get the opposite, contrast that they're the ones who are in benefit, who are at the top, who are untouchable, whatever. It's reliant on others, it's dependent on others and the world. Now, how this can be applied in a way that is not throwing away integrity and harming others, again, is that we don't have to use others, as scapegoats, as repositories for all our toxicity or negativity, or dumping trauma or accountability or whatever. It's recognizing content is already self holding itself. So you don't have to hold it in the first place. You don't have to take it on or merge with it in the first place. It's already self holding. So basically, it's already carrying the load for you. Emptiness is already empty. It's already free and liberated and released from all contents. And so you can say that content is already serving emptiness by carrying the load for it so that it doesn't have to. Now, when we are in the field or ideas of diminishment, unworthiness, something is wrong, it's not enough, unsupportedness, etc. It's because we are buying into the idea. We are in mergence with the idea. And so we are in experiencing of the idea. We are in this ease because we are interacting in entertaining negative idea or untruths. You know how when we come in contact with a person with a communicable disease, we also get infected, right? When that disease is transferred by, merging, like kissing or having intercourse or ingesting the infection that that person has, then we also get infected, right? There is the mergence with it, there's the interaction, there's the enmeshment, entrainment with it, with this ease. And so we also experience that. And so the same with ideas, when we enmesh ourselves with negative ideas of notness, untruths, not whole, not valid, not worthy, not enough, all the notness, right? Then we come into this ease, right? Because we are contracting that quote unquote virus or infection. And so we become contracted. We come into contractedness by buying into or by, you know, messing with that idea. It's like messing with a person, or again, coming in contact with someone with a very communicable disease, right? And so that if that's the case, if we know, if we recognize that, oh, that doesn't serve me, that's not good for my health, then practically speaking, we wouldn't enmesh with it, right? We wouldn't come into entrainment with it. We recognize that it's already the one holding the quote unquote disease. And so we let it be, right? We don't have to join in. We don't have to take it upon ourselves. It's already carrying that load for us. The notness ideas are already the one holding that. It's already the burden carriers, so to speak, the vectors, the disease vectors, that we don't have to take that on. Now, at the same time, the positive or true nature qualities is also held by its own self. We don't have to go chase it or possess it or try to get there and seize it, achieve it. Again, that load is already carried by that, by the idea itself. We don't have to labor for it, you know? It's already doing itself. It's already quote unquote self achieving itself, self getting itself. It's like, again, so going back to how people in power operate, they're not going to do labor, right? They're not going to like try to prove themselves or try to please people or try to achieve worthiness or validity. It's already done, for them. It's not an issue, you can say. And again, they don't get their hands dirty, right? If there's something that needs to be done, they have staff or they have workers that do it for them. They are separated from that. They're separated from the gladiator arena. They're an outcast from labor, And for us, as regular people, I assume, how that is applicable is that it's not so much as actually physically doing nothing unless you're in that position. But for us, regular folks, it's like an expansion of field wherein you could say the spectator position as well as the laborer position are both opened, are both online, you can say. Right. So, for example, as you are doing your work, it's recognizing that the doing is doing itself. But of course, it's your body, right? It's your hands, it's your doing. But it's like a recognition that it's doing itself. And there's the position of spectator or appreciator, actually, appreciator, that is opened. There's the appreciation of the isness of this labor, of this doingness. It's like emptiness, right, is here. And emptiness is being served by content, by the laborer. And so both are opened. As I've mentioned in my previous recording, it's treating as adult, right? Because when something is an adult, it's it's self-sustaining. You don't have to micromanage them. You don't have to like always keep your eyes on them or do everything for them because they're an adult, right? They can do their own thing. They can feed themselves. They can take care of themselves. They can manage themselves. Compared to a child who's dependent and you have to do everything for them or you have to keep your eye on them or they'll gonna hurt themselves. And so when you treat something as an adult, you recognize its self beingness, its self isingness, its self autonomy, and you are in appreciation. It's kind of like a blossoming flower, right? You are in this stepped back place as you appreciate the blooming of it, the isness of it. Now you can notice how this recognition of load carriers puts us in a place of the sense of having instead of lack. Instead of lack, therefore, I have to go get it. I have to go chase it. There's no one holding that burden, so I have to go do that. I have to spend the whole night being worried about this or being anxious about this because no one else is doing that. So I have to do that. And so recognizing that the load is already carried by content itself, we are sort of put in a place of having, right? We have something that does that or that carries that instead of myself. It's already here. Or, yes, it's here. There's no denial, let's say, of the concern or of the anxiety that I felt prior to the dental procedure. But that doesn't mean that I have to carry that all night or all day long until the until the dental procedure. Right? It doesn't mean I have to stress myself until the procedure is over. It doesn't serve me, right? It doesn't serve me to carry that anxiety until the day comes. It's not practical, right? Again, it doesn't serve, it's not beneficial. Another instance or personal example is when I was with a companion and there was the sort of sense or arising or notion of, oh, what if I'm not doing enough and they get bored with me and they're not satisfied or whatever, right? And so that arising, instead of me continuously carrying that all throughout the time and thus not being relaxed, right? I recognize that that quote unquote burden or load or weight is carried by that itself, right? It's carried by that notion or that idea itself. So I don't have to. It's carrying the load for me already, you can say, so that I'm clear of that. And I can just enjoy the time as it is, without needing something from another, without being so uptight or anal about the outcome, or being so preoccupied with, oh, what will the person think, or how can I, quote unquote, preserve my sense of worth, etc. Right? And so when that offer arose, all that quote unquote burden or concern, it was an offer that I didn't take upon myself. And I recognized that it's already self holding itself. So I don't have to. And again, in so doing, then there's no burden, There's not a like this imposition or wanting to get something out of the other or trying to control the other or the outcome or whatever. It's just allowing things in its natural course without any relation to wholeness, meaning, oh, if this happens, my wholeness will be diminished. This should happen so that I can feel good about myself. The time or the spending of time was clean instead of dumping responsibility or impositions onto another, right? So being in emptiness actually puts us in a place of fullness or wholeness, paradoxically, because there's the allowance of the isness of everything, of the wholeness of everything. And so that's how it is. When you are in emptiness, that's the, you can say, place or field that you can get a sense of havingness, paradoxically, ironically, like a bowl. A bowl is hollow, is empty. But since it's empty, it can receive stuff, right? Or an open hand. It can receive. And so there's a sense of having compared to a closed fist wherein, there's only a sense of contractedness. There's only a sense of this preoccupied busyness on something that's only causing static and stress, right? And there is the withholding. Instead of receiving, you're actually withholding yourself from something. And that's the thing when you're unmerged from content and you're in emptiness, then your focus or attention is freed up, right? It's not interlaced with a specific content or idea or a negative idea, right? It's not interlocked with dis-ease. It's freed up. And so then you can choose, you can choose the content or isness that you prefer. It's kind of like a social media or the internet. It's up to us to choose which content to watch, right? To tune into. It's up to us which content to give our entertaining to engage with. We're not being forced to watch contents that are not to our liking, that we have no interest in. It's there, right? We're not in denial of it. We're not invalidating it. It's part of the whole sphere of social media, of content creation, of the library of contents, but it's up to us if we want to feed our attention to it. We can choose which quote unquote load carrier or content to shine our spotlight on. Now, I think what is really practical and that reorient us is the shifting of perspective because we grow up conditioned. And the conditioning is that we're taught to look outside for our wholeness, for our well being, for a sense of home, for a sense of belongingness, for a sense of whatever, whatever the ego wants, right? We're always taught to look outside and dump this responsibility onto other people and onto the world. You're the one responsible for my well being. It's in there. You're the one who's gonna give me what I want. I have to seek out the best place or best situation or best status position where I feel finally belonged, right? That's the bait, that's the bait of this world. Is that it's as if it's the one that holds that. But what I realize is that it's the other way around. It's not in there, it's not out there in the world or in anyone's hands. It's here in emptiness. Home, quote unquote, home is here. It's not in any spot on the planet or any position or whatever. But it's here, being an outsider in emptiness instead of always trying to get in, trying to possess, trying to acquire. It's actually the opposite. It's here being an outsider in emptiness. Paradoxically, it is this quote unquote outcasted field where home is. Thinking that the sense of home or belonging should be sourced from the world and that you should find it out there is the quote unquote the propaganda, the bait, the lie. you can say. What's interesting is that I've always felt like an outcast or an outsider, especially like when I was still in school or even as a regular folk in this country. And so being an outsider is kind of like a main theme in my life, being different. And of course, I used to see it as a quote unquote a wrongness, something that should not be, something that should be quote unquote fixed. And I should find some kind of belongingness out there in the external. It's the external that contains the sense of home or belongingness, right? But now, as I get more and more mature, I realize that it's actually here where home is. Anytime some kind of challenge or some kind of unpreferred situation happens, the home base of emptiness always is my go-to, you can say, is the place where I can take back power or where I can come from a place of rationality when responding, you know. And so being a quote unquote outcast is actually quote unquote correct. It's not a mistake, right? Again, emptiness is naturally quote unquote separated from content. It's naturally empty. It's naturally uh, an outsider. Quote unquote, it doesn't belong, it doesn't belong in there. It has no business in there. It has no business colonizing or merging with content or carry the already self carrying load or contracting itself in it.